My name is Angela Ramirez. I'm 41 years old. I died on the pavement of LaSalle Street. I'm a trauma nurse, born and raised on the South Side. My life wasn't complicated. It was work, it was my son Leo's soccer games, it was paying the mortgage, and it was trying to get enough sleep between 12-hour shifts at the hospital. I prayed sometimes, the way you do when you're tired, little prayers for strength, for my son to be safe, for the bleeding to stop on my patient in bed 4. I believed in God, but I kept my head down. Life felt safer that way. The night of the big protest downtown, I wasn't there to march. I wasn't there to chant or wave a sign for one side or the other. To be honest, I was tired of sides. In the ER, you learn fast that pain doesn't wear a political jersey. It just bleeds. So I packed a first aid bag, gauze, saline wash, tourniquets, the basics. I just wanted to help anyone who got hurt. I thought if I could just clean a wound or wrap an ankle, I could bring a little bit of peace into the middle of all that noise. I was so naive. It started off okay. People were chanting, holding signs. But as the sun went down, the air changed. You could feel it. The energy got tight, angry. A bottle shattered somewhere behind me, and it was like a switch was flipped. Shouts turned into screams. The crowd surged forward, and the police line pushed back. Tear gas bloomed in the air, a chemical cloud that made everyone choke and cry. Then I heard it, a sound I know too well from my work. Pop, 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 gunfire. People started running, falling. The beautiful, ordered chaos of a protest turned into just chaos. I saw a young man in a hoodie go down, clutching his leg. A few feet away, a police officer was on his knees, his face pale with shock. In the middle of it all was a teenage girl, no older than my Leo's babysitter, frozen with fear. My training kicked in. You don't think, you just move. I ran toward the young man, trying to get him behind a concrete planter. I was shouting, telling him to put pressure on it, that I was a nurse. I just wanted to pull him to safety. That's when I felt it, a hard, sudden punch to my chest. It didn't even hurt at first. It just knocked the wind out of me. I looked down. There was a dark spot growing on my gray t-shirt. My knees felt like water. They just gave out from under me. I fell onto the concrete. The last thing I saw was the blur of streetlights and flashing blue and red. The last sound I heard was a wall of sirens getting closer, and the sound of 1,000 people screaming. And then silence. Complete, total, perfect silence. The sirens were gone. The screaming was gone. The burning in my lungs from the tear gas, the sharp pain in my chest, all of it just stopped. I opened my eyes. I wasn't on the dirty street anymore. I was somewhere else. There were no walls, no ceiling, no floor, just a soft, endless space drenched in a clean, white light. It wasn't a blinding light like a headlight. It was gentle, like the light on a foggy morning before the sun has fully risen. The air itself felt different. It hummed. Not a sound you could hear with your ears, but a vibration you felt in the very center of your being. It was the feeling of music, the feeling of life itself, humming all around me. And standing in front of me was a man. He wasn't glowing, he wasn't floating or transparent like a ghost. He was solid, real. He wore a simple, plain tunic, the color of desert sand. His feet were bare. He was just there. But he was more real, more alive than anything I had ever seen on earth. Everything else in my life suddenly felt like a shadow, and he was the only solid thing that had ever existed. I didn't need an introduction. I didn't need a name. Every part of me knew. My soul knew. It was Jesus. The first thing I noticed were his eyes. They weren't angry. They weren't disappointed. They were heartbroken. I could feel the weight of 1,000,000 sorrows in his gaze, a grief so deep it felt older than the mountains. He was looking at me, but he was also looking through me, at the whole broken world I had just left behind. His presence didn't make me feel judged. It did something stranger. It made me feel still. All the noise in my head, The constant chatter of worry and fear and planning that had been my life for 41 years just stopped. For the first time, I felt what it was like to be completely at peace, anchored by his stillness. He didn't speak with his mouth at first. The thought just appeared in my mind, but it was his voice, a voice that didn't travel through the air but seemed to create the air itself. It was gentle, but it carried the weight of absolute truth. "Angela," he said, and my name in his voice felt like coming home. "You tried to bring peace where there was none, but the world you came from no longer knows what truth costs." Then the space around us changed. The soft white light became like a screen, a living theater showing me our world, but through his eyes. It wasn't heaven, and it wasn't hell. It was earth. It was us. I saw a pastor standing in a pulpit in a beautiful church with cameras and bright lights. He was talking about God, but the words were twisted. He was using scripture to build his own fame, to gather money, to make people feel good instead of making them holy. Jesus didn't say anything, but I could feel his sadness, a deep ache for the sheep being led by a shepherd who only loved himself. The scene shifted. I saw an activist on a street corner, her face red with rage, screaming into a megaphone. She believed she was fighting for justice. She believed she was on the side of the oppressed. But her heart was so full of hate for the other side that the hate had become her god. She was using truth as a weapon, a club to beat people with, not a light to guide them. Then I saw a politician, smiling into a camera, talking about unity. But a moment later, I saw him in a private room, laughing with his staff about how they were using people's pain to get more votes, to gain more power. He saw human suffering as a tool. He even showed me good people, Christian people, kneeling by their bedsides. They prayed for peace. They prayed for the violence to stop. But then I saw inside their hearts. I saw a secret flicker of satisfaction when someone on the other side got into trouble, when a politician they didn't like was humiliated, when a news anchor they hated was fired. They prayed for peace with their lips, but they celebrated division in their hearts. And then he showed me myself. I saw myself in the hospital break room. A few of the other nurses were talking about a new policy, one that made it easier to end the lives of the unborn. I knew it was wrong. I felt it deep in my gut, a sickness in my soul. But I stayed silent. I just sipped my coffee. I didn't want to cause trouble. I didn't want them to think I was judgmental. I was afraid of what they would think of me. I saw myself at a family dinner, listening to a relative spread ugly gossip about a neighbor, a lie, a damaging, cruel lie, and I said nothing. I just changed the subject. I chose comfort over truth. I saw my whole life of staying neutral, of thinking that being in the middle, not picking a side, was the same as being righteous. I thought it was peace, but looking at it through his eyes, I saw it for what it was. It was fear. His voice returned, softer this time, but with a clarity that cut through my whole being. "You cannot stand for truth halfway, Angela. Neutrality in the face of a lie is not peace. It is surrender. You have surrendered to lies your entire life to keep your own small comfort." The words didn't feel like an accusation. They felt like a diagnosis from the greatest doctor in the universe. He was showing me the sickness I never knew I had. Then the vision around us shifted again. We were standing in a vast, gray field under a sky with no sun and no moon, and the field was full of people, thousands upon thousands of souls. They weren't in chains, they weren't burning, they were just standing there, lost. Each face wore the same expression, confusion, a deep, heartbreaking regret. "Who are they?" I asked, my own voice feeling small and thin in this immense place. "These are the ones who died for a truth," Jesus said, his voice full of sorrow. "They died for their political party. They died for their cause. They died for their anger. They died believing they were fighting for good, but they never stopped to ask whose truth they were serving. They built their house on the sand of human opinion, and when the storm came, it washed away." I looked at their faces. I saw protesters and police officers. I saw politicians and voters. I saw pastors and activists. They had all been enemies on earth, but here they were the same. They were all souls who had fought with all their might, only to realize they had fought for the wrong kingdom. They had fought for a flag, an idea, or a person, but not for him. Jesus looked back at me, and his eyes burned with a love so intense it was almost painful. "Truth," he said, and the word echoed across the entire field of souls, "is not a weapon to win an argument. It is not a banner to wave at a rally. It is not a side you pick in a fight. Truth is a person, and it is a cross you must carry." As he said the word cross, I felt a fire ignite in my chest. It wasn't the pain of the bullet, it was something else, a burning conviction, a purifying heat that melted away all my excuses, all my fears, all my carefully built walls of neutrality. Tears streamed down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of understanding. I had spent 15 years as a nurse, patching up bodies, stopping bleeding, setting bones. I was so proud of saving lives. But in that moment, I realized with a crushing weight that I had never once been brave enough to do anything to save a soul. I had spent my life saving the vessel but ignoring the treasure inside. I looked at Jesus, and for the first time, I felt a desperate longing. I didn't want to leave. The thought of going back to the noise, the anger, the lies, it was unbearable. This place, this stillness with him, was the only thing that had ever felt truly real. "Please," I whispered, "can I stay here? With you? I'm so tired of the fighting down there. I just want to stay." I begged him. I told him I was ready. I wanted his peace forever. A smile touched his lips, but it was a sad smile. He reached out and put a hand on my shoulder. His touch wasn't like a physical hand. It was like warmth and light and strength pouring directly into me. "The fight is not finished, my child," he said gently. "Your work is not done. I am sending you back." "But what am I supposed to do?" I cried. "I don't know how to do what you're asking. I'm not brave." "You don't have to be brave," he answered, his voice wrapping around me like a blanket. "You just have to love them enough to tell them the truth. Go back, Angela. Go back and tell them that standing for my truth will cost them everything. It will cost them their friends. It will cost them their reputation. It will cost them their comfort, and for some, it will cost them their life. But tell them it is the only thing that will ever set them free." He looked deep into my eyes one last time. "Tell them I am waiting. Now go." The last thing I felt was his love, a powerful, overwhelming wave of it. And then I gasped. A huge, ragged breath that burned my throat. The white light was gone, replaced by the blinding, sterile fluorescent lights of a hospital room. A machine was beeping, fast and loud, right next to my ear. Someone was yelling my name. "Angela, Angela, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand." My chest felt like it had been struck by lightning. A deep, throbbing fire. I tried to speak, but only a croak came out. I could feel tubes in my nose and throat. A paramedic with wide, terrified eyes was leaning over me. "We got her back. We got a pulse," he shouted to someone else. My eyes filled with tears, and I started to weep, big, uncontrollable sobs that shook my whole body. The paramedic thought I was crying from pain or fear. He kept saying, "It's okay, you're safe now, you're going to be okay." But he was wrong. I wasn't crying because I was scared. I was crying because I had just left heaven. I was crying because I had to leave him. They told me later that a stray bullet had pierced my lung and clipped a major artery. I had bled out on the street. They lost my pulse in the ambulance. For 7 full minutes, I was clinically dead. The doctors said it was a miracle I was alive. They said it was an even bigger miracle that I had no brain damage. They don't know the half of it. I didn't just come back to life. I came back with a reason to live. Now, when I see the news, when I see the protests and the angry faces on TV, I don't see enemies anymore. I don't see left and right, or us versus them. I see that field of lost souls. I see confused people, fighting and screaming and dying for truths that are too small for eternity, truths that will turn to dust. The real battle, the one Jesus showed me, isn't happening in Washington or on the streets of our cities. It's happening in our hearts. It's light versus darkness. And every time we stay silent when we should speak, every time we choose comfort over conviction, every little lie we tell ourselves to avoid trouble, we are feeding the dark. Jesus asked me to tell you something. He asked me to tell you that truth isn't just an idea, it's a person. And he's waiting for you. Standing for him might be the hardest thing you ever do. It might cost you everything you think is important, but I have been to the other side, and I can tell you, with every fiber of my being, it is the only thing that truly matters. He is the only thing that matters.